as a grown-up, right? Like, I know it was for the best. But as a child, I felt that I was forced to leave everything behind, including my loved ones and everybody, to start a new life in a country where I felt like I did not belong.
Hello, I'm Tijani Musa.
And I'm Yazmin Musa, and this is how we're doing it.
Welcome to How We're Doing It. Here we share stories about our journey and experiences of being first-generation college graduates, our family, buying our first home, moving across the country, and living a debt-free lifestyle. We do so in an authentic, fun, and educational way to help other first-generation immigrants with similar paths. So, Mrs. Yazmin, what are we discussing today?
Today's topic is my immigration story.
Your immigration story, your immigrant story, right? Mm-hmm. This is going to be exciting. So before we started recording, we were discussing why should we even bother to tell our immigrant story? From your point of view, why do you think this is important for somebody to know?
I think that the story of immigrants comes in many shapes and forms.
Yes.
Right? We all go through different struggles. But I think that at the end of the day, the one thing that those differences, those struggles are kind of what brings us together as a community. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to share our stories and to be proud of it.
Yes.
And to try to reach others who may be in similar paths, or others who may not even know that these are all the things that someone can face when they're coming from a new country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you. I think that sharing our story is one, you want to be able to reflect on how far you've come. That's number one. Number two, knowing that somebody else out there may have a similar story, but they are not at the level that you're at. And maybe when they hear your story, they can be inspired by it and be like, okay, if this person went through all of these struggles or went through all their path, I could use their story as a motivation to also help me work towards where I needed to be. And so I strongly believe in sharing stories for ourselves and then also for others.
Absolutely. And so what we'll be doing is today I'll share mine and then you'll share yours next week.
That's the hope. And I'm hoping to learn from you and hear your story and get inspired and motivated so that when it's my turn to share my story, I'll be ready to do that. And this is, like we said, we basically created the reason why we're sharing this story. And for today, it is a time because the host of this podcast is me and you. And so we want the listeners, our fans, our community to understand where we come from, to understand when we talk about first generation stories, what we mean by that. When we talk about being outside of the United States, being born outside the United States, what we mean by that. And so that's why we decided that, you know what, let's take it back in the day. Let's take it back to the drawing boards. Let's take it back to the basics. Let the people understand us. Let the people know who we are as individuals, not only just the people behind the mic, but let them know our true stories. And this is the starting of our true beginnings and our true stories. And we're starting it off with Yazmin. So Yazmin, go ahead.
Okay. So I was born in Veracruz, Mexico, which it's a puerto, it's a port, where the ships come and port.
Yes.
And bring their goods and all the things. It's a city that, if you're looking at the map, it lies right underneath the Gulf of Mexico. Beaches, lots of them. All the seafood, full of lots of culture. I love Veracruz. It's home, and it's where my heart always is because my grandparents are there. So growing up, I come from a low-income family, very, very humble beginnings, and also very little educational background. back then, my parents, my sister, and I lived in what I call a shack now. Literally a shack. It's not there anymore, but at the time, that's what it was. My dad, his education, he took a couple high school classes, and then my mom's education is just up to middle school.
Okay.
And so, you know, for them, for my dad specifically, finding jobs was difficult. It was a lot of different low paying jobs. So really on the daily, my family was struggling just to have food on the table.
Okay.
It was so bad. Our shack was so bad that I remember I was probably around 4, maybe, when this happened, 4 or 5 years old. And I remember I would help my mom carry buckets of water from a nearby well in over to our home because we didn't have any running water or any type of water system. And that's how my mom did dishes. That's how she did her laundry. That's how she did all the things with no running water.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. There were a lot of hardships, but I think there was also a lot of happy in there.
Okay.
I have a lot of happy memories of my early childhood. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents who helped raise me. That's why I say like a little piece of my heart is in Veracruz always, because my grandparents are still there. With my grandpa, he was a construction worker, so I would help him with all the construction projects. And then with my grandma, we would bond over embroidery. She actually taught me how to do it. I didn't do it well, but I did it.
Okay.
And we would watch novelas together.
What's your favorite novela?
From back then,
Yes.
I don't know, probably like a kiddie novela, like Cómplices al Rescate or
I like that
something
one.
like that.
Yeah.
Cómplices al Rescate is like, I don't know the literal translation. I can't think of the word.
That's fine. Go on.
Oh, I guess it's accomplices to the rescue. Is that a word?
Accomplices is a word.
Yeah, so accomplices to the rescue.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if it's wrong. Oh well. English isn't my first language.
That's fine. You get a pass.
Yeah, I do. So when I was around 7 years old, my dad was presented with the opportunity to cross the border and come into the United States illegally. And, you know, when you have a family, when you have young children and a wife, you know, who need your support, to my dad, if the opportunity was there, he was going to take it. And so he left in search of that American dream, right? It was the dream to provide a better life for his children. And it took him a couple attempts to make it here. He faced many trials in the process. I don't want to go too into depth with that because I think that's his story. I've only heard, you know, different parts of it, different pieces of it throughout the years. But my dad's a very strong man. And, you know, at the time, I was so young. I didn't really know how to make sense of what was going on or understand why it was happening. I really thought that my dad had left me because he didn't love me anymore.
Wow.
And that wasn't the case at all. My dad, you know, as soon as he got here, he worked as much as he could and took advantage of all the overtime and all the things to try and bring us here. But as a child, I didn't see that.
Right.
And I just felt abandoned. And it was really hard for me. I remember my grades dropped. I was very sad. When he had like left multiple times, right? Like every time he tried and it failed, he had to come back. There was at least 2 times that he left, and I remember these like vivid memories of saying goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in one of them, he looked at me and he said, "You can't cry."
Mm.
And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "You can't cry because if you cry, I won't make it. You need to stop crying, and you need to be strong for your mom and your sister."
Mm.
And you can imagine the weight of that, right? Like, I'm here 7 years old thinking that if I do really cry, my dad's not going to make it over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew how important it was for him to get here. I didn't realize the magnitude of it, but I knew that it was important.
Right.
Even as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad worked very hard for about 10 months, saved up as much as he could. And then within that, after those 10 months, my mom, my sister, and I joined him here.
Mm-hmm.
I was 8 years old when my mom, my sister, and I crossed the border illegally to reunite with my dad. Honestly, crossing the border for my sister and I was really no challenge.
Mm-hmm.
We got in a red car with a man and a woman who were smuggling us in. Back then, you called, or I think you still do, I don't know, but they were known as el pollero or el coyote, the people smuggler.
Mm-hmm.
When we were almost at the border, the pollero told us to pretend to be asleep. And my sister Yenny, who was 3 years old at the time, actually fell asleep.
Mm.
But I was very nervous and I was not able to do so. But I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep, and I heard everything. When we came to Border Patrol, they asked the woman in the car what she had with her and where she was going. The woman just replied that she was crossing with her children and that she did not have anything with her.
Mm.
We didn't have any clothes, none of that. Like, it was just maybe a backpack, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Very few things.
Mm-hmm.
After a couple minutes, I remember the patrol agent, talked to her, went off for a little bit, and then he came back after a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Seemed like eternity. But they let us through. And just like that, I was in the U.S. Now, for my mom, it was a very different experience because she actually had to cross the desert and swim through the Rio Grande to get here.
Mm.
But fortunately, all 3 of us made it across, and a couple days later, our whole family reunited in Houston, Texas. For me, leaving my home country as a child was very hard. I was very close with my grandparents, and to this day, I have a very clear memory of hugging my grandmother goodbye as she said, "Cuida tu mamá y a tu hermanita, mi niña," meaning take care of your mom and your little sister, my girl. It shatters my heart when I think about that.
Yeah.
As a grown-up, right? Like, I know it was for the best, but as a child, I felt that I was forced to leave everything behind, including my loved ones and everybody, to start a new life in a country where I felt like I did not belong.
Yeah.
The other big thing that was going on at that time, mentally and emotionally for me, is that I was reuniting with my dad for the first time, and that was difficult because I had resentment and anger towards him for leaving me. I really felt like I couldn't love him anymore. So my way of doing that is to try and stay away from him as much as possible. I was too young, obviously. I didn't understand why he had left. And it wasn't until I was much older that I really realized the magnitude of the decision that both my parents made for the sake of our family. But this didn't come until years later, because as a kid, you don't think like that.
Right.
When we first got here, so we reunited in Houston, Texas, and then we took a road trip up to Virginia, which is where my family lived for decades. That's where our new life started, Northern Virginia. We lived in a very small apartment, low-income neighborhood. I started school in 3rd grade. And that's when I began to get a real taste of like what American culture was.
Right.
I would say that the hardest part of it all was learning English. I just remember thinking, I don't know a single thing. What are they saying? Like I would just stare at people. Now, the good thing was that my classroom was very diverse and we had a lot of other Latino kids
Okay.
in the class. And so they would help me out. They would help translate for me.
Okay.
And I also had teachers, great teachers who cared. They cared about me. They cared about my education, and they did all that they could to help. Most of my days were spent in, back then it was called ESOL, English for speakers of other languages. But I was able to pick up on the language pretty fast. By the end of 3rd grade, I had finally learned to read in English. I remember there was one day my class was doing like a read out loud together. And my teacher actually called on me to read out loud in front of the whole class. And that was their first time hearing me actually read in English and speak it. And I did so well that at the end of my portion, the whole class was clapping. They were cheering. It was so cute. I shared it. I like to share that story. I shared it when I taught 3rd grade. I would share it with them. It was my small moment.
I like it. I like it. I like it.
But you know, learning English is just like one part of the whole equation, right?
Right.
In other ways, I still felt like an outsider. My mom would, for like lunch, for example, my mom would pack like tacos dorados, fried tacos with lettuce, salsa, grated cheese, and cream. You know the ones that I'm talking about.
Of course, I've been around.
And I would have kids pointing and being like, "What's that?" And they would look at it like with gross faces. And it was embarrassing, like you feel like you're an outsider. Like I love my tacos dorados, but I was like, oh, I guess I can't eat that here. So because I didn't want to be any different, I was like, well, I'm just going to try to disguise my Mexican background and I'm just going to have a sandwich because that's what normal American children are eating for lunch. So that's what I should be eating too.
Wow.
It made me feel more comfortable at the moment, but I don't think I realized how I was assimilating and kind of losing my Mexican culture and my heritage in that process. My cultural identity overall.
Right.
After elementary school, my family moved away from our low-income neighborhood, and I started to attend schools that were predominantly white. So throughout middle school and high school, it was a struggle of figuring out who I was. I'm not Mexican enough because I left when I was a kid, but I'm also not American enough because of my complexion.
Wow.
And I'm ashamed to admit this, but I think it's part of a lesson that I've learned, and I've grown since. But at one point, I even denied that I spoke Spanish and that I was born in Mexico.
Wow.
Just to fit in with my peers, to not be any different.
What age was that? Or what grade was that, do you think? Was this in middle school or high school?
Like 8th, 9th grade, yeah.
Wow.
It was late middle school going to high school.
Yeah.
It really wasn't until I went to university that I really learned to embrace my identity and culture. Because before that, I was just fearful that I was going to be judged because of my background. I was a very quiet kid throughout like middle school, high school. I was a good kid. I didn't get in trouble. I did what I was supposed to. My parents emphasized that my only job was to get good grades.
Mm-hmm.
Do nothing else. Just get good grades.
Mm-hmm.
There was never time to get involved in any type of sport or after school activity because there was no one that could pick me up after school. I needed to ride the school bus.
Yeah.
If I missed the bus in the morning, too bad. You can't. That's not. It wasn't an option. Like it just wasn't an option. Can't say, oh, I overslept.
All right.
No such thing, because if I miss the bus, I'm not gonna make it to school that day, and my parents are gonna get upset.
Yeah.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom for a lot of my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then around like middle school, once my sister got older and got into school as well, that's when my mom went to work.
Okay.
And so there was no one at home. And for the longest time, my mom didn't drive.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just my dad driving us wherever we needed to go. I would say that despite everything, though, I was very privileged in having the right support to put me on a path of academic success.
Okay.
That led me to be able to attend the university.
Okay.
And once I was in university, that's when I really learned to be proud of my Mexican culture, to represent it, to speak my Spanish out loud, to eat my tacos dorados in public. I even introduced you to them very early on. And just to love who I am and where I come from.
Okay.
I think for the longest time, that was a part of my identity that I was trying to hide. And there was no reason for it. But, you know, in my head, it was to fit in.
Right.
To be like everybody else. Because it wasn't cool. And I do regret it. I do regret not being proud of it, but at the same time I'm like, okay, well, I've learned and I've grown from it, and I'm a better person for going through that, and now I can represent my culture even more proudly.
I mean, listening to your story, it wasn't like you did it because you wanted to. It was because it was a circumstance that led to it. And so I wanted to ask you this. What were some of your experiences, your early experiences here in the U.S. as a young person? What were some of, it could be fun memories, fun experiences, or just any other challenges that you faced? You've mentioned challenges of trying to fit in, learning the language. Did you have any like good memories? Maybe like your first birthday here in the United States. How was that like?
Yeah, I loved my first birthday here. So my family came here in May, and my birthday's in November.
Right.
And it was April or May, I think, when we came. And so my first birthday celebrated here is my 9th birthday. And my parents threw me a big birthday party. They killed a pig.
Oh.
Just to feed the whole community.
Yeah. It sounded like it. The whole village.
Yes. And I got, lots of presents. It was my dream birthday party. So I got to dress up like Barbie, and the theme was Barbie. Everything was pink. Everything was cute. Barbie cake, Barbie balloons, Barbie everything.
Wow. It reminds me of the movie we just saw. The Barbie movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was pink everything.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's good.
It was the first time that I think my parents celebrated that we were all here together. Because when we first crossed, remember we crossed in May. We got here in May, and my sister's birthday is in June. She turned 4, but I remember for her birthday we were so poor. We didn't have any money.
You used all the money for your birthday. Years before.
No, because this is just after we crossed. You have to remember, like, my dad just spent all this money getting us
That's
here.
true. Her birthday is early.
Yes, her birthday was like a month after getting here. So
right.
Obviously it's going to be, money's going to be tight. There's not going to be a lot of places to go. So I remember my parents got her a little cake, and they bought her a new pair of sneakers, and that was her birthday present.
Wow.
And yeah, I think of moments of us just being together.
Yeah.
My dad would make fun dinners. And by fun, I mean they would be eggs, but he would make them a little different. He would put like some pepper on it, and then he would squeeze some lemon over it, and it was tasty. It was like I was having something new, but it was really just an egg.
Yeah. Appreciating the little things.
Yeah. Or we would have like ramen with tuna. And he would call it, oh, it's a fish soup. Just eat it.
Man, being poor makes you so creative around food.
Yeah, I think especially when you have kids, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because kids can be picky and they don't always like the same things.
Yes.
And oh gosh, some kids even have allergies, right? Like, thank God, that wasn't the case for my sister and I feel like when you're in poverty, you don't have the luxury of having all these allergies.
Yes.
Can't afford them.
Yep.
But so we would eat anything, but I know my mom and dad both had to get very creative at times.
Okay.
And so, right, like for me being first generation, like the first to graduate high school, when I started sharing my experience at the beginning, I told you guys that my dad did some high school, but he didn't even get to graduate high school. So for me, hey, when I graduated, that was my whole family graduating with me.
Yeah.
When I graduated college, that was my whole family graduating with me as well. Because both my parents didn't get that opportunity. And now, years later, like looking back at it, that is why my dad made the decision that he wanted to better the life of his children, was to see exactly that, to see his two daughters have options and opportunities that were never presented to him.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. The things that our parents have to do to set us up for success is just selfless. It's remarkable. It's amazing. It's just, that's why it doesn't matter how much we give them. We can never give them enough for what they've done or sacrificed for us.
Exactly. So I think about my mom a lot in that process too, because my mom she's always been someone who's scared. Scared to try new things, scared to take a risk, scared to do stuff that's out of the ordinary. And for my mom to stand her ground and say, I'm coming to the U.S. too, and I'm bringing my daughters with me,
knowing all the
risk, man.
Yeah.
I think about it and I'm like, wow, the power, the strength she must have had to have as a mom to say, I'm going to risk my children's lives to be able to provide for them a better opportunity. And I think she deserves all the praise for that, because even though, she wasn't the one doing the hard labor, working long hours like my dad was, she was taking care of 2 kids by herself. And she found the strength in her to leave her home, her parents, her sisters, leave everything behind to get us here.
Yeah, and keep in mind, she did not travel in the car with y'all.
No.
She gave her 2 daughters to strangers.
Yes.
And
2 complete strangers.
Yep, and she went through the riverside.
So I remember the morning that we were picked up, you go to safe houses. So that morning we're in a safe house, and we're told an hour. We're gonna come get you around this hour. And that same morning, my mom had already been picked up and had left us.
Wow.
And we were crossing with another family. I stayed with the other family. When my mom left, she said, you take care of your sister and you get yourself ready, because remember, they're picking you up at this time. When they came to pick me up, I was gross. because it was much earlier than anticipated. I
Right.
was in like a little tank top and shorts, and my mom had told me to get cute. But the lady got there, the one that's smuggling us, and she's like, "There's no time for that. Let's just go." And I wasn't even supposed to cross with my little sister. I was supposed to cross with a 1-year-old baby that was with the other family. So it was going to be me and the baby. But that baby, at the end of the day, when it's time to go, the baby kept crying, didn't want to leave her mom. So they ended up just putting my sister in the car with me.
Wow. So they were gonna separate you
All
and
three
your
of
sister,
us, yes.
coming in different times.
Because my mom had already left.
Right.
And my sister and I are together, but we're supposed to leave. Like, I'm supposed to cross one day, and my sister's going to cross the next day.
Wow. Without knowing what's on the other side, there wasn't any guarantee that any of you could make it across.
No. Who knows what could have happened?
Wow.
Because then, after we crossed the border, we got on a bus. We landed in, like, I want to say it was McAllen, Texas, or we were headed towards McAllen. I don't remember exactly where we crossed, if I'm being 100% honest. But I know our stop point safe house was McAllen, and then we were going to Houston from there. And to get from where we had crossed to McAllen, we had to take a bus because the man smuggler left in the car, and the lady stayed with me and my sister, and she's the one that took us on the bus. And it was the same thing. She just told us, "You guys pretend to sleep. If they stop us, you're sleeping. Go to sleep. Go to sleep." That's all she would say, is just go to sleep.
Yeah. Wow.
It's scary.
It's remarkable.
Thinking about it, you know, scary.
Wow. What a story.
You have any more questions?
Not at this moment. I'm still trying to process the just because knowing your mom, right? Like you were describing her, somebody who is not a risk taker at all. But somehow the mother instincts that we always talk about, right? She believed strongly that this decision could change the trajectory of my family's life. And she bought into the idea that your dad was selling, that this is the right decision for us. And for a woman who does not take any risk was actually along this plan, and she went through it. And like I said earlier, not only did she went through with this, she took you and your sister and handed you to strangers.
And people, I remember, like, our own family, like my grandparents, my tias, they would tell her, "You're crazy. If you want to go be with your husband, you go by yourself.
Yeah.
Why are you going to take your kids?
Why are you putting them through that?
Why are you putting them through that?"
Yeah.
And my mom, she was very quiet about it.
Yeah.
Because she would only tell, like, immediate family.
Yes.
When it was time to go, my mom told me, "You don't say a single thing at school. You don't tell anyone. You don't do anything. You don't say anything. You don't know anything. You're not going anywhere. Don't make it. Don't let anybody know. You can't tell anyone."
Right.
I still went to school up until my last day, knowing very well that I was leaving the next morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
It's the strength. It's the courage, the drive to help your children have a better life. And I can't thank my parents enough for that. Now, as a parent, I see it, and I see it in a whole new light. Because now, you hear stories about the border now and the risk that people take. Like this was in 2001 when all of this happened. It was much easier to get in the country. Security wasn't as tight. Smugglers found a way. Now you hear of people having to leave their children in the middle of the desert
They have to decide, yeah.
in the hopes that immigration will find them
Mm-hmm.
and help them cross safely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a scary thought,
Mm-hmm.
and as a parent, I don't know that I could ever do it.
Yeah. It's a tough situation. The things you see nowadays, and the news, and us being in Texas, we are pretty much is a border state. The things you see and hear about is ridiculous.
I'll finish this with ways that I like to integrate my culture into my daily life.
Mm-hmm.
I love to watch telenovelas,
Okay.
but now I've transitioned to series, but I still have my love for telenovelas.
Okay.
Now they're playing telenovelas on like VIX, Netflix has some of them, so
Mm-hmm.
I'll watch them there. I also like to make a lot of my grandma's recipes. So my mom, when she came here, she says she barely knew how to make anything, and she would constantly call my grandma to get her recipes.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I moved out, I would call my mom all the time to get her recipes, and my mom's recipes are directly my grandma's recipes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm making those meals pretty much on the daily. I always tell you, oh, I'm craving this, I'm just gonna make it.
Yeah. Just a disclaimer. This is not an invitation for you to come to our house for food. My wife is just sharing about her family recipes. So don't try to come over here and try to get any of our recipes or food. Go on.
And then the last point is, now as a parent, right? I have to find ways that I can help our daughter feel connected to her multiple cultural backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
because not only is she Mexican, she's also Sierra Leonean,
Mm-hmm.
she's Nigerian,
Mm-hmm.
and then add on that American, because that's where she was born.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a lot of work to do
Oh, yes, we do.
to help her figure out her
Yep.
identity and who she is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. And I can't think of a better person to be beside and work beside to try to mold our daughter. And I have a few questions for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when people hear about immigrants, and people always talk about people are leaving their countries to come over here to chase the American dream. And they don't normally hear about the things that the sacrifices that these people make, the things that they leave behind, like their loved ones, people that they care about, the memories, the things that they grew up eating, the things that they grew up having as, souvenirs, the things that they grew up visiting, the things that they grew up knowing. All of those things, they have to leave all of those behind to come to the United States in pursuit of the American dream. And there isn't any guarantee that you would actually be able to achieve that American dream, whatever that looks like for those individuals. Knowing that, knowing all the sacrifices that you have to make, your parents have to make, your sister had made to get here, did you now understand the bigger picture as to why your dad made the move that he did?
As a kid?
Now, as an adult,
No,
looking back.
as an adult, I fully understand it.
Right.
As a kid, I did not.
Okay.
Did I understand your question correctly?
I believe you understand the question, because you did share with us that as a kid, you resented him because you didn't know the reason why he was leaving you. You thought he didn't love you. But now that you have your own daughter and you've seen how your life has changed from being in Mexico to now, I'm assuming that your life, in terms of like economically, your life is a little bit better now compared to if you were in Mexico. Am I right?
100%. Yeah. And as an adult, now I see the big picture. Now I see why he had to leave.
Right.
To help provide the minute my dad left and started being able to send my mom money, he's working consistently, making money.
Mm-hmm.
My mom started treating us like that was the first time that we went to McDonald's. Because McDonald's in Mexico at the time was a luxury. Not everybody gets to go and enjoy. And, it was the McDonald's with the play place. So my mom liked to take us there. But my mom, man, she had some money, but not too much. She always took good care of her money. And so she would take us on these outings, and she wouldn't eat. She would eat our leftovers. Whatever me and my sister left, that's what she would eat.
Wow. She continued to make sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. So our life immediately changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the eyes of me as a kid, my dad's not there. I'd rather have my dad there than be eating at McDonald's any day.
Yeah.
Now as an adult, I'm like, wow, like he did all that. He could have gotten here and easily forgotten about us, started a new family.
You hear about those stories too?
All the time. Very common.
Yeah.
Or could have said, hey, maybe I'll bring my wife. The girls can stay over there. Their grandparents will take care of them. Who knows? There were so many other scenarios. But as a parent now, I'm like, wow, like, no, he always, believed in taking care of our little family unit. And I think that's one of the big reasons why my sister and I are always so inclined, to be around our parents. And we want to be living near them or with them and, spending time together. It's because our immediate family unit was always the main priority. And we felt that was prioritized by my parents. And I think both my sister and I just continued that as we got older.
That's fantastic. What is your relationship now with your grandparents?
Oh, I wish I could see them more often.
Yeah.
It makes me sad to still think about them.
Yeah.
My grandma cries just like I do every time that we leave. So we crossed in 2001, the first time we were allowed to go back. And the first time I saw my grandparents again, I was about to turn 15.
Almost doubled. Yeah.
So
okay.
I might have gotten the years mixed up, but our relationship now, I appreciate them so much. Grandparents are, I think the relaxed version of parents, and so they spoil you in all the ways. And I miss them. My grandma, I think, gets emotional thinking that both my sister and I lived and have lived this whole life outside of her, outside of her seeing us, outside of being near her. And I think that's something, I can't ever give her back. So I think now, as an adult and having my own child, I want Yazmin to go to Mexico and to spend as much time with my abuelitos as she can, right now when they're alive, they're healthy. It was beautiful the first time we went, and they met her. The first time we went with Yazmin, my abuelita was rocking her, singing her the same exact song that I sing to Yazmin every single night to put her and rock her to sleep. And I didn't even realize, that's where I got it from.
Wow.
But that was where I got it from. And hearing my grandma doing it to my child, man, it's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah. And your child rewarded your grandparents by taking her first steps in Mexico.
She had taken such a long time to walk. Well, it felt like a long time. Every baby's different.
Yeah, she was over a year and I guess 13 months, you would say.
No, was she?
Yep, because we went in November.
She was 13 months.
Yep.
Yeah. And those very first steps were in front of her great-grandma. I'm excited for them to see her again soon.
Yeah, Full circle.
Full circle moment. Yeah. To answer your question, to summarize, I love them very much and appreciate them for everything that they did for me as a child and the ways they took care of me, for helping, when my parents were struggling, when my parents didn't have much. They were young parents. And so there were a lot of things that I don't think they knew, that they were doing their best. And so I appreciate them a lot more. And I thank God for continuing to allow them to live. And I pray that I have more time to spend with them.
Yes. And now that you've shared this story, right, with listeners, I know individual stories are more complex than this, but you've done a fine job explaining to us things you grew up with and sharing this story. My last question for you is that of all the things that you've been able to achieve or accomplish, are you happy or are you content with where your life is now?
I
And
am.
what are you most proud of?
I am content with my life now. I am very blessed in many ways. I have a great supportive system. I have, I have my dream career, being in the world of visual impairments.
Mm-hmm.
I have a loving husband. I have a healthy child. I have a lot of blessings. And I think everything happens for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I would have stayed in Mexico, I would have never met you. So
That's right.
I'm content where I'm at, And at the same time, I miss my family over there. But I know that I can also help them more by being here.
Mm-hmm.
My grandpa, he's diabetic. He gets sick often. And whenever my mom tells me your grandpa's not doing well, the first thing I do is tell you, hey, grandpa's not feeling well. Let's send him some money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even send it directly, we just give it to my mom to send to him.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I can help him in other ways by being here. I can help him in other ways than I could if I was over there.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, obviously I miss the time that I missed growing up. My cousins over there, they're so privileged. They get to visit them every Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
every weekend. Sundays are days off, so they visit every Sunday. And Yenny and I get so jealous. We're like, you guys take it for granted. Like, here we are. We wish we had that opportunity, and we don't. Because sometimes they'll miss because Del Norte comes in. The north winds come in and they're like, oh no, it's too cold, we're not going. And we're like, seriously? Like, we're living in snow here. You can go put on a sweater, suck it up, and go visit the grandparents.
Right.
Right. And the second part of your question was,
I was asking, what are you most proud of with all you've achieved and accomplished so far?
I think my college graduation.
Okay.
Is the most proudest thing, the most proudest moment. It was a combination of my parents' sacrifice, my whole family's, a combination of my hard work, a combination of the privilege I had to be able to find the right resources to help get me there. And it was beautiful to see it all come together in that way.
That's it.
All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed listening to my immigration story. It's something that's very, obviously important to me. And I hope that, through listening, our audience is able to understand me a little better, and then in turn understand why we love talking about how we're doing it, because you and I both come from literally nothing, and we've been able to do so much together and independently.
Yes. and we're just getting started. Thank you for listening to another episode of How We're Doing It. We want to hear from you. Contact us at hwdipodcast@gmail.com or leave a comment. If you like the show, consider subscribing in order to get notified of new episodes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again on the next episode.
Mama. Bye-bye.